I just thought I would share with you my kit list for some of the recent long distance trails I've done in the UK, such as the Pennine Way and the Cape Wrath Trail. You may have seen some of the videos that I've put on my YouTube channel. I've just got back from the West Highland Way in Scotland, and I thought while I had the kit out and getting it sorted out, I would share what I took on that particular trail with you. So we'll start with the clothing that I took. So to begin, the stuff that I wore, I went with trail shoes and found that certainly for the West Highland Way, trail shoes were perfectly adequate. My feet were very comfortable. I wore a pair of standard hiking socks. These happen to be Down Tough, but other socks are available. And I used Vaseline on my feet each morning to try and prevent friction and reduce the tendency that I get to have like hot spots and developing blisters. Base layer, I used some very quick drying sports underwear. These happen to be Ron Hill, and then a base layer, a long sleeved zip up Montane top, which was very warm, and then on top of that I have a hoodie, quite a lightweight Rab hoodie. Quite like the idea of a hoodie because it just gives you that extra level of protection, particularly of an evening. You can just put the hood up and helps keep your head warm. Found that quite useful. And a pair of standard walking trousers. These again happen to be Montane Terrors, I think. So they were really rugged, very tough. They have zipped pockets which keep everything in place. So with the base layer and the fleece, that very thin fleecy stuff, I was quite happy, particularly when I was walking. I kept warm enough. I also had a buff to wear. This was useful obviously around the neck, but also at times I put that on my head to keep my head warm. And to keep the sun out of my eyes, I use a cap, just a simple cap. And it also, if it's raining, helps to keep the driving rain off my glasses a little bit, gives a bit of protection there. So that's kind of what I walked in, and as I say, I found that quite comfortable. In terms of waterproof gear, I have a Mountain Equipment Gore-Tex jacket, which is fairly heavy duty. It's not the lightest of jackets, but for kind of UK conditions I find it quite good. And a very, very lightweight pair of over trousers, which obviously I'll wear less frequently. This is also more of a kind of wind stopper as well, on top of my fleece mid-layer. So at night time and spare clothing, I would carry, in this case, a Berghaus top, like a puffer type jacket. Got long sleeves, a middle zipper, which it's a kind of like a smock type thing, with quantum filling rather than a down filling, so that if it did get wet it would dry. But I found that quite good. It's very lightweight, very packable, and that was very useful, particularly on cold mornings and also during the night, as you'll find out when I review my sleeping kit. In terms of carrying spare gear, I carry 2 pairs of socks. In this case, a pair of waterproof socks, which I had kind of mixed experience with, but I carried them and wore them. A pair of Bridgedale hiking socks, another pair of lightweight, quick drying underwear. I've got a spare base layer. I also took these Patagonia long johns made of capilene, and I found that they were very, very useful while I was sleeping, very, very warm. So that's kind of the entirety of my clothing. The other thing that I did take that I haven't mentioned here is a very thin pair of gloves and some waterproof over mitts for the heavy rain. So that's the clothing. Now let's have a look at some of the other gear. So now we'll have a look at the big three: the tent, the sleeping bag and the rucksack. So for my rucksack, I'm using an Exped Lightning 60 litre bag. It's got built-in waist belt, some pockets on the side here, which are kind of useful for putting in snacks and other bits and pieces that you maybe need quick access to. But two pockets on the side and just one big compartment down the middle here. It is a very lightweight bag and quite comfortable in my experience. In wet weather I use a waterproof cover. This one's made by Osprey. So that's a rucksack for carrying all my gear in. One of the things that I'd perhaps like to explore is getting some little pods to go on the shoulder straps here, perhaps so that I can store a bottle of water, because getting to the pockets at the side, which are also filled up with other bits and pieces, is a little bit difficult when you're on the move. Although there is capability, I believe, for some sort of bladder system to be used. Yeah, there you go, H2O, hole there for a bladder, which I haven't got. This is the tarp tent notch. This is the tent that I used on the West Highland Way. It's the first time I've used it. I had to seal the tent myself with seam sealer. That seemed to work all right. Comes with a repair kit, which I guess might prove important at some point. In terms of its use, I found it was very good, but tended to be a little bit bellowy in wind and a bit more drafty than I'm used to. The previous tent that I've used is really a four-season tent, a Hilleberg Acto. So I guess going from a Hilleberg Acto to something like this is a little bit more kind of minimalist in terms of the tarp tent. So that was my experience. I kept dry, but maybe a little bit less drafty, or more drafty with this. Right, the sleeping bag. This is a Sea to Summit Spark 2. It's got a temperature rating of -2 centigrade. I think that may be is the kind of maximum comfort level. It's a 850 gram fill level with down, ultra dry down. This proved to be a little bit of a mistake in terms of April conditions this year in the Scottish Highlands, where there's still quite a lot of snow on the tops, and I was camping reasonably high in some areas. During the evening, during the night, the small hours, this did get a little bit cold, and I had to resort to wearing all of my other clothing, apart from the clothing that I was walking in, to keep reasonably warm. So in future, I would say this would probably work well in the warmer end of spring and into summer, and I would probably use a more heavy duty sleeping bag for early spring, April time, maybe more of a 3-season bag. But other than that, it it worked reasonably okay. I managed to keep it dry as well. So that's the main 3 big items. Let's have a look at some of the other kit. So I've mentioned the sleeping bag and its limitations on the West Highland Way being more of a 2-season bag for use during April, but let's just have a look at some of the other sleeping kit that I used. So to start with, I have a very thin closed cell neoprene mat which rolls out onto the floor of the tent, and this gives me a little bit of insulation from the ground below. Also serves as a backup in case my main sleeping pad develops a fault. The other use for this is I carry it on the side of my backpack and I can use it to sit on or lie out on during lunch times and break times. So that proves very useful. My main sleeping mat is a Thermarest NeoAir X-Lite. This is the long version because I'm longer than 6 foot. It's wide enough for me and I found that it's very reliable and very comfortable. If the ground's a little bit uneven, certainly with this underneath and then this inflated, it does help to provide a level of comfort that I previously, just using these sort of things, never really experienced. So expensive, but I would wholeheartedly recommend some sort of inflatable mattress, particularly one that's got very good thermal qualities, which this one I believe has. So I'm well insulated from the ground. In terms of blowing up the Thermarest, I now carry a kind of it's basically a dry sack with a little inflator stop on the bottom of it. So this serves as a kind of rucksack liner where I put all my bits and pieces, but then when I get to camp I can put that over the inflator at the end and then fill up with air and inflate the mattress with dry air instead of moist air from my mouth. So I find that very useful, particularly at the end of the day when I find I'm quite tired and it's a bit too much of an effort sometimes to even start to set about inflating this by mouth and lungs. So that kind of serves 2 purposes. I find that useful. I also have an inflatable pillow which is very light. This happens to be a Sea to Summit Aeros pillow. And within the sleeping bag, to try and keep my sleeping bag nice and clean, and also to give me a little bit of extra thermal boost, I have a silk sleeping bag liner. But I have to say, as I've mentioned before, even with this and all the gear that I have shown previously, I was still a bit too cold for the conditions. Anyway, so that's my sleeping gear. Right, so now that we've dealt with the sleeping system and the tent and all that kind of stuff, just go through some of the cooking gear that I take and the equipment that I use for managing holding water and accessing water on the trail. Let's have a look at that. So in terms of food, I use a variety of little containers. This one I use for coffee powder. It's just a plastic container with a screw top lid. I can usually get enough coffee in there to last me a good few days. So that's that. I also have these little bags with a kind of see-through front, and I use these to put my food in. So that's for my food, and that tends to go towards the top of my rucksack. In terms of cooking the food, I use a little Soto Windmaster stove, which has proven very reliable. It stores very neatly into this little black bag here. So I've got a couple of Bic lighters, just in case one fails, some matches with a strip of sandpaper in there so that I can use the matches. I've got a stand here for the gas cylinder, just in case I'm on sort of uneven ground, and that just helps to provide a little bit of support for it. That folds up nice and easy. And all of this stuff goes into this little blue bag here, which keeps everything together. Previously I only used this 750mm titanium cooking pot for cooking as well as drinking, but on recent trips I've also taken a cup. This is a insulated cup which keeps your hot drink warm for longer, so between that and this, that's all my cooking gear. Often I'll fill this with other bits and pieces, and there's a little bag that just helps to keep everything together. From the point of view of water, I carry a 1 litre Nalgene bottle, a Knock Outdoors bladder, which it's proven good really, because I got the one that's compatible with the Katadyn water filter. So what I can do is undo that and put the Katadyn water filter onto here, and I can then filter a bigger volume of water should I need to. So the Katadyn, generally speaking, has been very good. It's got quite a reasonable flow rate, but obviously if you use any kind of cloudy or silty water, like any filter, it will block up. But so far this has been quite reliable. So in terms of water, that's just about it. I also will carry a little 500 milliliter bottle with a sports top, which I keep in the side pocket of my rucksack for drinking on the go. So once I get to camp, I sort out the water and then get my cooking started, and all my foodstuffs are all in one place. Right, so let's have a look at the personal care kit that I take with me on these long distance trails. Right, so in my bag I have a towel, which came in quite useful. Useful more than just a towel. You can use it to dry the condensation off your tent and so on, but maybe this one's a bit too big. I could have probably got away with something either a half or a quarter of that size. Maybe a bit too big, that. Anyway, it's quite light, dries very quickly on the back of your rucksack. Just in terms of Scottish Highlands, I also took, but in April didn't really need, a midgie net. This just goes over your head to keep the midges away. Probably from mid-May through to the end of September, you would be wise to take some midge insect repellent and a midgie net. In terms of toileting equipment, some toilet tissue. I've got a large, I think it's a snow stake, basically for pegging your tent out, but I use that to dig a cat hole, and a bottle of antibacterial hand gel. So that all stays neatly in that pouch. For toiletries, I've got a little bag here that zips up neatly, and I have some Vaseline, which is really useful for any kind of chafing. I use that on my feet every day and put my wool socks on top of that, and I've never had since using Vaseline, never had any blisters. May work for you, you may have other ideas. Be interesting to hear what techniques you have for avoiding blisters, but mine is Vaseline. I have some body wash in a small container there if I get to a place where there's a shower, a small tube of toothpaste and toothbrush. You'll notice I've cut the end off. That's very kind of like a classic backpacking approach, but I've only done that to try and get it to fit neatly into this little pouch rather than to save 2 grams off the end. Also some dental floss. I've heard that that can also be used sometimes for repairs, but anyway, I use it as dental floss, and a small tin of deodorant. So that's my personal care kit. My first aid kit, this is the bag that I keep it in. I've got a couple of earplugs in case I'm in a noisy campsite. I've got a longish crepe bandage, a couple of antiseptic wipes, some elastoplasts, looks like I need to probably carry more of them, some ibuprofen and paracetamol, some chlorine tablets, some system here for managing ticks. There's a couple of little twisters there, and also this little card type device which I've also got. Ticks are becoming more and more common now wherever you go. I've met people that seem to attract ticks like nothing else, but I've so far managed to avoid them. I've got a little mirror there which you can also use to look behind your legs to see if you've got any ticks there. It's also a kind of rescue type thing as well. You can flash or signal for help, I guess. Little pair of scissors, they come in handy, and if I'm going for any length of time I'll probably add some nail clippers in there, and maybe some Compeed to treat any blisters that do arise. But that's my fairly simple first aid kit. Right, finally let's have a look at the kind of miscellaneous stuff that I carry. These are the final bits and bobs that we'll finish with. So first off, a rather beat up but very handy pair of trekking poles. These happen to be Faizan compact, and round the top here I put a little bit of a roll of Luca tape which I can use to bind my feet up if I start getting any signs of hot spots or pains with developing blisters. I find trekking poles very useful. They give me a lot of support, particularly going uphill and downhill and over very rough terrain. Obviously not essential, but certainly when you're carrying a pack they give you almost an extra couple of legs really, in terms of steadying you over difficult terrain. And for my knees certainly I feel the benefit of using these sort of things. They're quite light, and also now in terms of the tent that I've got, the tarp tent notch, I need these trekking poles to provide the tent with support. The other thing I'll take is a pen and a map. Everything that I carry goes into individual stuff sacks. I also take a Petzl Tikka, in this case, Tikka 2 head torch. It's not rechargeable, just uses, I think it's AAA batteries, but it provides a decent light with a flashing light on it. There aren't any coloured lights there, but it's handy in the tent when things get dark. So, a light. And the final thing I'll talk about is the electronic gear which I carry, which I'll show just now. I take my iPhone and a charging cable with a socket to go in the wall with USB connections there, 2 of them in this case. I have also, if I don't get access to a mains electric supply, I have got a Anker power bank. I think this is a 20,100 milliamp hours power bank. So it's one of the big ones. It's quite a heavy thing, but it will charge my iPhone up and my GoPro quite a few times before it needs replenishing. So that's my charging arrangement. In terms of filming for YouTube, I use a GoPro and I also use my iPhone occasionally. For the GoPro, it's a Hero 8 Black. I've put a little bit of a wind, I think they call it a dead cat, just a little, just stuck it on there to stop the wind noise where the speaker bit is. I've got an Ultrapod, which is handy for tying onto trees and lamp posts and things like that using this Velcro strapping. Find that quite useful. And obviously it opens out into a standard tripod as well. I have 2 GoPro batteries which are ultra reliable and 3 generic batteries from Amazon, which some of them last quite a long time and 1 or 2 of them maybe don't last quite as long, but I carry those 3 and the lead from here will also fit into the back there so that I can charge that cluster up if I need to. I carry a little wallet here to put my SD cards in. They're kept safe in there. Everything then is put into a dry bag so that none of this stuff is going to be exposed to any moisture, fingers crossed. And last and finally, I forgot to mention, with the cooking gear, I also have a long handled spoon, which is handy if you get some of the dehydrated packet meals, because you can get right down into the very bottom of the meal with the long handled spoon. And I also have a sharp knife for cutting things like cheese, and I think I took some salami with me this last hike to chop up into my noodles, and a sharp knife is quite handy to have. Well, I hope you found this little video about my kit list helpful for backpacking, certainly in the UK, in the warmer season, shall we say, late spring to early autumn. Definitely not a winter backpacking kit list. Got any questions or queries or comments at all about the stuff that I've just described? Any changes that you think I'd make? Anything that goes in your pack which I haven't got in my pack? Be interesting to hear what they are. Please put them in the comments below. But for now, if you found any value in this video, please give it a thumbs up and a like, and subscribe to my channel. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.